Hello, and welcome to our session on student marketing in a post-COVID world at Think Student Live. My name is Mel, and I am the Sales and Marketing Director at the Pi News. In this session, we are joined by Matt Pagano, Account Manager at NetNatives, Nick Wilmer, Head of Education at NetNatives, Alistair Hayes, Executive Director of Marketing and Communications at Vermont College of Fine Arts, and Callie Hilka, Digital Marketing Campaign Manager at Vermont College of Fine Arts. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're going to be looking at the horizon of student marketing and discussing what elements are staying the same and what changes we can expect post-COVID-19. We're going to see if we'll have some time at the end for your questions, so please do pop them into the chat box on the right of your screen. And if not, you can always get your questions answered later at the Meet Our Speakers session. All right. Okay, so Matt, let's start with you. I understand NetNatives has worked with Vermont College of Fine Arts on a very successful advertising campaign and saw a huge increase in enrollments during one of the most challenging years for education. You guys even won gold for your digital marketing recruitment strategy in the 36th Annual Educational Advertising Awards. So congrats to you all. Can you tell us about the campaign and what you did and how you got these results?
Of course, and thank you first, Mel, for leading the panel today. Really excited just to hear everyone speak and talk about really everything going on within student recruitment and education post-COVID. Obviously, such a huge topic right now as we all kind of get back to our daily normal lives, which is exciting, but there's also, it's really been an exciting year for Vermont College of Fine Arts, and within NetNatives being able to work with them, has led to just a tremendous year for the school. We're really excited about everything moving forward. And, in talking about how we kind of were able to achieve these awards, and the school was able to, have their highest enrollment period since they've really been a college. I think, it really kind of all starts out from the beginning with NetNatives. And, when we first came over here in 2017, working within the US, VCFA was really one of the first schools that we got to work with. And Callie and Alistair have really been around since the beginning. And I think the relationship that we have together ultimately has the biggest factor of the success that we've been able to achieve. And really with NetNatives, we're a digital first marketing group, centered around student recruitment. So, I think the first thing was being able to partner with Vermont College of Fine Arts. From the beginning, their focus has always been digital marketing, digital marketing. This is where we need to engage with our audience. Really because the programs that they offer are for students that are based around the country, really around the world. We're reaching out to so many different large cities because the programs that they offer are extremely niche, but they're also very popular in the coming of the digital age. They have programs like film, visual art, graphic design, writing for children and young adults. So they're extremely niche, but as social media gets more and more popular, as these industries continue to grow, I mean, you just look at film, for example, all the different streaming sites, they had these opportunities for people to start to enroll in these programs. And again, from the beginning, we were just able to establish how we wanted to set up our digital marketing strategy. So when we first started working together, a lot of our focus was dedicated upon generating leads. And we kind of didn't look at the quality or how we were getting there from the beginning. We just wanted leads. And we were just looking into the different avenues. We would utilize platforms like Facebook and Google, and essentially the school was still doing well. They're interacting, they're engaging with these leads. But specifically over time, we wanted to establish more and more of getting the quality of leads, more so than the overall quantity, which has actually turned out that we've been able to generate more leads and of higher quality. But I think it really established a couple of different things. One was, first is the openness to utilizing new platforms on a yearly basis. So I think every year with VCFA, we've engaged in a different social media platform. So like I mentioned, we started off really basic, kind of utilizing Facebook platforms that we utilized were, looking into YouTube and utilizing kind of bumper advertisements so that we can start to engage an audience, get familiar with the brand. Because as I mentioned, BCFA is recruiting students from all over the country, and a lot of the school's competitors we were doing, and this was kind of decided upon after COVID had started. So this was about May of June of 2020 that we were coming up to this. So we realized, like, hey, we're going to have to be a little bit different. One of the things and new platforms we utilized were Twitter, because again, we're looking into like film, visual art. A lot of people that are on Twitter and these the type of students that they're looking to, they're engaging in a lot of these different discussions. So we needed to start how we could actually bring students to Vermont's website. We also utilized Quora as well, which was completely new for the school and pretty new for what we wanted to do. They also offer a music composition program as well. So, being engaging on platforms where they're asking questions about music, where they're asking questions about film, and to have sense with BCFA. So when we built up the impressions, then when we went to kind of the action stage that we call of, this is where students need to submit, again, their information. Where BCFA has then looked into is how are we going to automated workflows that will nurture a student from basically when they submit a lead to kind of that, final touch point, those applications, those enrollments. And that's something that we've really built from the ground up. And now the school has soon to be a fully functioning connection of Akira with Slate software, where we can track everything from cost per application, cost per enrollment versus advertising spend. So we've kind of established the full funnel here, willingness to, being able to, throughout digital media, all these different platforms, be open to, again, all the changes that are coming within COVID. And then within the marketing automation with personalization, utilizing Akira so that way their recruitment team doesn't have to spend the time sending one-off emails to their potential students that come through. They have, 4, 5, 6 emails that are set up to send over the course of a week's time, a month's time. So it allows them to establish, build that relationship as they go through. And I mean, really, I think ultimately we can accept credit, but VCFA, and I know Callie and Alistair want to talk more, but and how they exist within and how they offer them and how a student can gain a degree is really ultimately why the school has achieved so much success, because that hybrid mentality is honestly something that they had going on almost, pre-COVID. So the change didn't really affect them as much, and the results really came from just the amount of work that the school has been able to do as a whole.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, yeah. Maybe Callie and Alistair, if I could bring you in and you guys could talk a little bit about the programs that you have at the college. And also, I know you guys, we talked about before all of this, about your low residency experience. I wanted to hear a bit more about that and that modal of education, and also what trends you've seen since COVID has hit. Sorry, it's a few questions.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so our low residency programs are 2-year graduate programs where we have students to study in a remote format, where we kind of where they're allocated a mentor, a faculty mentor, to kind of help them through that kind of remote study piece. And then usually in pandemic times, we have students come back to campus for 2 weeks, twice a year, to kind of study, work with different faculty members, and have these kind of, like, we call them like these sort of magical experiences where they actually get sort of interact properly as groups, almost a bit like full residency education in that way. So the workshops and all sorts of different things that they could do on site. And what that's changed sort of over the pandemic period is that we've had to kind of adapt those to Zoom and to other kind of platforms to kind of keep that magic going. But kind of as a result, despite the pandemic, we've kind of seen almost no impact on our retention of students, because people are still kind of aware that they're going to get that level of education at a traditional college, but have to pay a significant amount more, whereas ours is significantly lower cost. And at the same time, like these residencies that we put on, they kind of retain that sort of magic that we've talked about. And in terms of results, that shift that Matt was talking about, to digital marketing, engaging students in like a digital recruitment model, has actually increased our enrollment by more than 20% over the period, and our applications have increased by more than 40%. And despite we're moving into like a post-pandemic period, our enrollment trends are still heading in the same direction, which is really, really encouraging, I think.
Yeah.
Wow, amazing. That's great, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of not what I expected to hear, but it's really good to hear.
Well, that's awesome. There's one thing that's been sort of ironic, and I think it's that, I mean, I've been with the college, I guess, now for almost 8 years. And we did talk a lot about how the low residency model of most of our programs was that, you know, you are working from your own space most of the year, and then twice a year you're on campus. And we used to spend a lot of time really talking up coming to campus. And what had sort of happened in the pandemic was we realized how helpful and attractive it was, I guess, to be able to offer this, you know, in a way that maybe most people would consider kind of online education, which we originally tried to stay away from. But it sort of became more of this practical, you know, tactical choice, you know, for us to say, oh, well, we actually do, you know, do that well. And so it's not that we don't talk about, you know, ever coming back to campus again, but we were able to really concentrate on, you know, how well we could work with students and have this real kind of, you know, one-on-one experience from far away. So that's kind of been exciting to see, you know, and a little bit of a pivot in a way that I didn't really expect.
Yeah, great. Nick, I'd like to bring you in here. You work with a lot of colleges and schools to help make sense of their marketing objectives at Net Natives. Can you talk about what you do there and sort of share your perspective on marketing trends within the education sector right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, nice to be on another webinar with you, Mel. Thank you for hosting very much. So in terms of marketing objectives, we've actually got a bit of data. So we did a piece of research with THE to ask education marketers around the globe what their main challenges were and, you know, where they were currently sitting. Actually, we asked them around their enrollment targets, and 41% of education marketers have said their enrollment targets have increased this year, and then 71% have said their targets are going to go up again over the next 3 years as well. So even though we've gone through a really difficult year with COVID, actually a lot of marketers are finding themselves in the place where they need to get more students than they have done before. And then we asked them around what their challenges were, and those top 3 challenges came back as limited budgets, conversion or challenges with conversion, and also tracking ROI. So we're in a position where education marketers have got more students to get through the door and limited budgets and struggling to understand. So I suppose a lot of the work that I do and Matt does, that the team at Natives do, it goes back to basics, and it goes back to looking at, you know, proper market research and what analysis have we got around prospective, you know, student audiences, and which audiences can be the most likely to engage with us and then ultimately enroll, and then choosing and segmenting and targeting effectively and positioning. You know, positioning your offering in an effective way to that audience to bring them along that conversion journey, and then, you know, setting up marketing objectives and checking to make sure the objectives align with those, and then deciding on the correct advertising channels and tactics to deliver on those, and ultimately tracking everything that's possible and tracking all the way through that conversion funnel, so you understand that, you know, the marketing spend you put in the beginning, you know, how many actual students are we getting at the end of that, and is that enough, and are we on track to hit those targets? So yeah, I think that's been explained well on this session so far, and also the previous session as well. But in terms of marketing trends, I spoke about this in the previous webinar, but that over the past 12 years, 15 years, maybe even 20 years, the education sector globally has gone through this exponential growth of digitization or digital transformation, where sort of getting online or having to get to grips with digital marketing as a whole. And then COVID happened last year. Research decision and how we go about doing it. Because of the digitization, there's a lot more around tracking and understanding. So rather than just putting something out into the ether and hoping that students come back, it's the wonder of digital marketing and other channels and building in workflows into digital advertising and student recruitment is taking things leaps and bounds, because what you're able to do is suddenly start to segment the audiences up and make sure you're spending time with the right kinds of student, the right quality of student, but also providing a really excellent customer service for every student that's making contact with you as an institution. And it's saving time, and it's making a better journey for those students as well.
Wow. So student marketers have a lot on their plate.
Absolutely.
And a lot of pressure. And if like you're saying, which was actually leading on to my next question to Matt, was like, what if you don't have a big budget, being asked to hit these crazy targets? What do you do in that case? Matt, do you have anything to say on that?
That's a challenge that, here at Net Natives, we work with a number of different schools that they face every single day. And Nick was touching on a lot of the different points that, that was one of the common trends that he sees across the board is, our budget, we can't compete with our other competitors. And, when you have a low budget, it is a bit of a hassle because it forces you to work smarter, to actually work a little bit harder. When you have a larger budget, you can kind of just throw money at things, and sometimes it fixes a problem. But I think what we've seen, especially during COVID, moving forward for that, there's a lot of ways that you can still utilize this budget that you're faced with in a smart manner. And it really touches on a lot of the different things Nick just talked about outside of advertising to start. So I think the number one thing really is looking into the research and data behind your student recruitment and your marketing, because a lot of times you'll have this budget, but you're not really reaching out to a lot of the students that are the right fit for you. I work with a lot of community colleges, and it's tough to recruit because they're recruiting traditional students who are 17, 18, but they offer a lot of certifications for a student that could have never been at school before, and they're going back for something within HVAC, or it could be like welding, or it could be public service or safety. So it's like, how do we expand on these targets? So it's really first identifying your ideal student type, what they, what are their demographics, where are they coming from, and specifically those research capabilities are, again, it's going to cost X amount of budget, but it's something that you can utilize to, really maximize your budget in the long run. And then I would say, really, what forms from the research side is then looking into the creative that your school is utilizing. So what we say is kind of a creative refresh, a creative rebrand. It can almost help increase your enrollments, or, just if you're working through a company, it's going to increase, these numbers can be by 20 to 30% of your enrollments the following year. And we've seen that across the board with schools that we've done new creative concepts for and different brands. It's just getting a fresh new look on, again, how a student is going to interact with your school, because a lot of times you think your brand is working, you think it's engaging well, but how your internal staff thinks and how your higher ups think is very different from what your students think, potential students, your community. So it's really just important to, again, look into the back end of how everyone is interacting within this regard. And then still, even before you get to the advertising efforts, big things that are involved in the process. Having your website go through a tagging where you can actually track data, track how students are engaging, so that way you can remarket, retarget out to these individuals. I know specifically within, working with VCFA, we've been able to build all of this data since 2017, 2018. So that way, when we reach back out, we have students that are interacting with us that they looked into going to school in 2019 and it just didn't work out for that time. But now they're coming back 2020, the situation can change. So there's a lot of different factors, but again, this is all before you get into advertising. And then from that regard, it's just going through how can we go through this process to engage a student, nurture them throughout the entire time. There's so many different ways to maximize your budget, but each of these ways, again, outside of advertising, are going to affect your enrollments moving forward.
Wow. So Alistair and Callie, do you feel this kind of pressure, and is your to-do list like super long?
Yeah, I think it's true. In fact, if I hearing you say that, Nick, was quite validating in a lot of ways. because the truth is there is like a significant financial pressure on the institution that isn't necessarily just enrollment based. So even though our enrollment is heading in a positive direction because of our model, we still have the same pressures of students not being able to be on campus, and therefore not spending money in the dorms. With the residential money coming in, there's the challenge of the catering side and all that piece too. So there's that infrastructure that still needs to be paid for. Yet, although the enrollment's going up, you still have that pressure of more. We need to generate more students. We need to grow our programs to be able to sort of fill that gap that's been sort of forced upon us over the last, over the last year. So yeah, it is definitely a big pressure.
Well, I think we've been able to benefit though from moving our sort of internal operations to an approach that's much more integrated, in terms of comprehensive and integrated, being able to have all of these systems work together and be able to track everything so much more succinctly and accurately, because several years ago we were using systems that didn't necessarily talk to each other in a good way, and so as a marketer I felt like we were dealing with faulty data because there was a lot of stuff that was missing, and so I'm really grateful for how we've continued to move toward having all of this stuff really talk to each other and work together in a way that we can be confident about, the data that we're looking at, and then the numbers that we're reporting, and being able to say, year over year, we've done X, and it's actually, really a good comparison. It's an accurate comparison. And so, yeah, and I think that's only going to get better. I think as our systems, talk to each other even more, and, adding all of that kind of intelligence to marketing has been really fun and a really nice forward movement, and so for a small college to be able to say, yeah, we actually are able to accurately do this instead of just sort of throw some money here and there and kind of cross your fingers and hope that does it. Yeah, it's been great to see.
Yeah, you got me thinking, like I need to tag stuff or my website. I don't know. Oh my gosh. Oh man, it's all in that data, eh? That's great.
All about that data.
Instead of just like throwing, exactly, like doing a shot in the dark and being like, what was the result of that? I don't know. How am I going to prove this to the higher ups and all of that? Sounds like it's really key in getting things moving and understanding. Oh my gosh. If you don't mind, I'd like to get a little bit, not political, but I'm an American over here in London, and we at the Pi we cover a lot what's going on in the U.S. with Biden and the Biden effect. In fact, we just wrote a whole thing on the PiReview.com. Check it out. So I wanted to ask Matt first. I know Biden, he recently announced he will double the size of Pell Grants as part of his American Families Plan. Can you explain a little bit of how that might impact enrollments? And then also, if Callie and Alistair, if you don't mind letting me know a little bit about on the ground, what's happening over there? Has there been an effect, especially on international enrollments? Mm-hmm. Sorry. So it's like Matt first and then.
Yeah, of course. I can definitely touch on that. So, in terms of, something that I was just speaking about were community colleges, I often think of these tier colleges of really the backbone of higher education. The students that they're working within, they're sometimes coming from low income families. They can be a first time college student. They can just be recently new here to the country. So community colleges offer so much opportunities for these students that they probably wouldn't get at a four-year university. So the main thing in President Biden's proposal was proposing 2 years of free education at a community college, which would be fantastic because, again, you can gain an associate's degree from a tier college. Some even offer bachelor's degrees that you can gain from them. So it allows you to join the workforce in a really quick and flexible manner because they offer programs that you can, go to classes at night. You can learn online. If you have a family, if you have a job, you can work around that. So to be able to offer those 2 years free for potential students, that's fantastic. And then where the Pell Grants kick in is basically this is financial aid that can be granted to pretty much anyone that is out there that goes through the application and applies for it. So right now, a Pell Grant is around $6,500 that you can utilize. And it's also really looking into the increase. So it's actually going to be increased about $1,400 across the board per individual. So you're looking at about, let's say, $8,000 that you can utilize for this federal Pell Grant. But if you're, say, going to a community college and you're getting that education for free, that $8,000 can then be used for like textbooks, room and board, which are really expensive things. When you go to school and you have to pay for a book, it is not something that is, a cheap errand to have. Yeah. So, for a student that is coming from, these type of families, it's really going to allow them to go back, get their associate's degree, continue their education in a way that works out for them. And then also they're looking into 2 years of subsidized tuition for students that are within families or within households that have an annual income of $125,000 or less. So again, it's just providing more opportunities to students, specifically allowing them to garner these education, but specifically for $125,000 or less. That's designed for HBCUs. Also, I believe it's some like tribal schools as well as minority serving institutions. So again, you're really benefiting in terms of creating more diversity and allowing these students from areas that may have not had the ability to do this in years past going forward, building their education up, allowing them to take care of their families, from upbringings that may have been really tough. So it's really going to help out that backbone, that community college, which I think all of the 2-year schools I work with are extremely excited about. And it's, it's really awesome to see these changes just coming in over the last few months of President Biden.
That's great. Sorry. Yeah. So I don't know, Alistair and Callie, did you want to comment on the Biden effect?
Yeah. Do you want me to go, Callie? I was going to say, I'm the opposite. I'm a Brit in America, so it's still the shock of now we have like a forward-thinking president, and it makes everything more optimistic just on the ground. People feel a lot more optimistic about support, both federally and from the state. Although these kind of grants don't actually affect or not actually a big effect on graduate model, just because of the way that we kind of function, they still have an effect on like the overall feeling of our potential students and the sort of knowledge that it's a more of a safe space to come and study in the US and with a college as a whole. So it's definitely a pretty positive impact for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say it just kind of remains to be seen, what the effects of that are going to be as we, as people figure out the job market. If there are people who are going to come back, or whether they're choosing to do school instead, or whether, it's a little bit of both. Yeah, I think that there's going to be some time where we're going to have to sort of figure out if that's really impacting some of our numbers in that way.
Callie, when we did our call yesterday, I think you talked about the trends of like seeing programs that lead to employability. Is this something else that going on? I mean, obviously, maybe not connected to the whole Biden thing, but is this a trend that you're seeing as well in terms of programs and interest?
I have to say, I think originally we saw some, especially last summer where it was kind of like nobody knew what to expect. We saw, we saw some trends toward very practical applications, and less about the like pedagogy of the program itself, and a bit more about, maybe people thinking about switching, careers. But honestly, as we've gone forward, I mean, we've definitely seen a rise in some of our programs that are maybe, on their face a little less, career centric, and it's a bit more like, interests that people have wanted to pursue and in another kind of way. So I feel like that kind of remains to be seen too, in terms of what all of the inquiries are going to mean, in terms of, are they actually going to, translate into applications where students come and then, tell us why they're here, like what made them apply, felt, interesting about our model. But certainly our admissions team, I mean, they're paying attention to that right now, kind of the conversations that they're having with all of the new inquiries that we've generated, I'd say in like the last 6+ months.
Okay, so again, something positive that like the creative arts, there's interest there, it's not all about,
yeah. I mean, and it's a little less maybe like, doom and gloom than people, I don't know. It is a bit more like, the world is colorful and people are excited to, explore different avenues of going forward with what like life, normal life, quote unquote, looks like for them.
Yeah, great. If I may switch it up a little bit, Nick and I did a whole kind of webinar on paperless marketing. So I kind of wanted to pick your brains about what's going on in terms of like the brochure. Nick, sustainability is a big thing, of course, for young people, for all of us, even geriatric millennials. I know you have some stats on how young people are responding to postal mail these days. Could you kind of talk us through some of that for us? Like, are they opening their mail?
Yeah, it was a great session, and an interesting point, because I talked all about digital transformation, everyone going on this digital journey, and then sort of a lot of colleges, universities have started scrapping their brochures or turning them into digital formats and doing interesting things that way. I thought the session was really interesting because we sort of went back and forth. We never got to the decision of whether or not we should ban the brochure or not, but there was, I think sustainability comes into it a lot. I mean, especially if you're looking at the younger generation, they care about the environment, they care about climate change, and anyone seen to be wasting paper, wasting resources is always going to go down particularly badly with that demographic. And I suppose even from a marketing terms, when it comes to how you market yourself and position yourselves, quite a lot of it is becoming more issue-based, around what students care about. So to then send them loads of brochures through the post, doesn't it? Sort of jars a little bit with that ideal. But also, last year you had those issues with, as COVID rose its ugly head across the world, just distribution, getting brochures out to people became a challenge. There's obviously hygiene issues about physically giving things to people, so it also died a death a little bit. But then I think where we came to in the session was that actually, a brochure, especially for a prospective student or a prospective student's family, it's a high value decision. There's a lot of investment and time and decision making goes into what university or college or course you're going to do. And sometimes now we're getting back to the place where we can possibly physically meet people. actually it is quite nice. Once you get to a certain point in the decision-making funnel, so you're at the point where you are deciding between 2 or 3 different places, actually having a physical brochure with the right kind of information in there to physically take home and look at and pick up, there's something quite tactile and something interesting about that. But I think gone are the days where just mass mailing loads of brochures out to students around the world is not the way forward. But also you think about agent networks in different countries as well, and I know that agents are always asking for brochures and content they can show to people, so there's value in that supply chain almost to make sure that people are well informed. But yeah, when it comes to direct mail, I think it was like the famous marketer Ogilvy who always said that his secret weapon was always direct mail. And he was talking about direct postal mail back in the day, but then it became email, and then we went on to the whole wealth of digital channels that we use now. And everyone sort of forgot about postal mail a little bit. But then I've got some stats. I think this is Kantar research, so it's more UK focused, but I think it does apply. If you look at the age groups who get most excited about or enjoyed receiving postal mail the most, the top category is 55 to 75 plus. So yeah, there's no surprises. They're not getting mail, and why not? That makes complete sense. And then you move down through the age categories, and what you see is this massive drop off straight away. So you sort of go, I suppose, beyond retirement age, and you go into sort of working professionals' lives, and people aren't as interested in getting postal mail. You haven't got time to go through postal mail. But then actually, interestingly, when you get down to the 15 to 24 group, suddenly it goes up again. There's almost like this whole turning circle of younger people just going, oh, I've got a piece of mail. That's something a little bit novel, perhaps, to receive a piece of mail that's addressed to them. You get to open up. So, yeah, there's a level of enjoyment and excitement that happens. So it starts to almost think, okay, is there value then in sending a piece of mail to them? There were some other stats as well. It was Q1 and Q2 of this year, and the percentage increase in digital actions that were driven by direct mail had also gone up 5%. So what we start to see is, as postal mail goes out, people get excited about it. It's not just about reading it, but it's about getting an action from that particular student and then potentially tracking that student through the journey. And it does have an impact on digital touch points as well. So you start to build a bit of a case for, well, actually, should we think about direct mail? I'm not talking about sending brochures to people at very early stages, but is there potential value in sending something in the post now when we can distribute, like a flyer or something interesting, not just a flyer, that's a bit old school, but something that's going to have resonance and actually get a student potentially excited. There definitely is potential for that now.
Callie and Alistair, any comments on this? What have you guys decided to do? Ban the brochure?
It's interesting actually, because hearing you say that, because we're such a small college, when you have maybe 375 students throughout the year, is that we have to be incredibly tactical on strategically tactical about exactly when we do send a piece of mail and what we actually produce, because our budgets are so tight. And actually, we end up only sending. We have an alumnix magazine that we use for dual purpose. So we'll have lots of stories in there which will be directly related to some of the students that are also participating in the current MFAs that are currently running at the moment. So basically, it'll serve double duty, and we'll try to, if we're going to put something out, or if there's something extra we're going to send that has to kind of fit with the plan that we're doing digitally. So like you said, I think in the past we would have just sent something out and then hope that somebody was interested in coming to the school. Now we have to be we can integrate it in with the digital tactics to try to encourage at exactly the right times to bring those students to campus.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, as a college, we don't, like Alistair said, I mean, we don't do a lot of direct mail. I mean, there's the Alumnix magazine, but really that's been trending, away from that for several years, pre-pandemic. But another thing is, I would say, as a graduate college, we're we don't do like a college catalog where we list everything, where it just is this sort of blind piece of like, here's what we do. You know, we have brochures for each program, because when we're able to get out to conferences and conferences are happening, we have had a lot of success with where we've chosen to go. In terms of meeting people face to face. And so those brochures and kind of printed collateral have been used primarily for those purposes. I mean, I would say I do, last year we put all of those brochures online. Some of them already were, but it was a more, pointed tactic to say, here's our brochure, and admissions would link to it and they could see kind of what we put in that sort of, those materials. But I would say too, I mean, kind of as a designer and honestly as a, Gen Xer, I'm kind of nostalgic for print in a way that, I can appreciate a nice printed piece of, beautiful something. And so, especially in our visual programs, we do keep an eye open for, the kinds of things that we can produce that really also showcase the program in a way that, it could be something that you could produce if you were in it. Like right now, our graphic design program is working on a book that they're designing to release for their anniversary. And in the past, we've sent out like designed posters, which are really cool, and you could get and kind of put up, and it's like a, 18 by 24 inch poster that was, a really specific, cool design coming straight from the program. And so those sorts of things are fun. It's less informational and more like, this is the kind of stuff that you can do here. And so I still think there's definitely some room for that for sure. But otherwise, I think we do sort of stay digital throughout the rest of the year, unless it feels special or, specifically targeted in a way that makes sense for our brand and our programs.
Yeah, especially in visual arts and stuff, you want to show off the students' work in some way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Perspective.
And they feel kind of like collector's items in a way. I mean, maybe it only feels that way to us, but I mean, we have gotten some feedback over the years where people have said, this is really cool. This is like actually something I would put up in my house, so that's
awesome.
Yeah, that's a fun thing.
Also, they work so hard on it too. So, you want to show it off in some way.
Yeah,
I think when my kids are going to go to college or whatever, I'm going to want like the brochure, like an old school mom. Flip through with my glasses. I'm into that. I'm into that. So if I may also, sorry, I'm just checking time. Okay, we got some more time. I wanted to talk about something very important. And actually, Matt, if I could bring you in, and Nick on this one, was the topic of social media platforms. So, okay, we were talking about like paperless stuff. So of course, this kind of leads us into what are the hot social media platforms for marketing to students right now. Can you kind of fill us in a little bit? I don't know which, Matt, you were talking about sort of going for YouTube this year with VCFA, Twitter, which I thought was really interesting. I wouldn't have thought Twitter, but of course, media, arts, creative industry makes sense.
Yeah, and to touch on that moving forward, I think we're really excited this year. Over kind of the next calendar year, we're also going to be utilizing Reddit, which I think is going to be a really good introduction into our digital plan. I think because you could just see the examples of how a Reddit community can really come together. Because I think a lot of the platforms that are kind of moving forward that we're seeing have some success right now, you're seeing Spotify in terms of podcasts, anything that dealt with audio throughout COVID was doing extremely well because people were just spending more time listening into things. But I mean, with Reddit, for example, I don't want to get into the whole cryptocurrency thing, but you could see how a Reddit forum can establish something, and just the conversations that they're having are skyrocketing and the number of users. So when we look into our partnership with VCFA, again, these concepts like film, that people are asking a lot of questions, a lot of positive trends. I know some schools look into Reddit and they can see, again, is that something, a brand that we want to be associated with? But again, most of the communities are moderated. A lot of the conversations that are going on are positive. You want to be on these platforms where people are spending a lot more time on. So I know specifically like Snapchat, while they're great, you're oftentimes scrolling through them extremely, just spending a quick amount of time. So we're looking into more ways where these eyeballs are on this, but for a longer period of time. So again, being able to introduce Reddit this year, we're really excited about, and across the board, looking into more so like podcast placements for other programs, a lot with these like niche types of courses that they're offering, because a lot of these potential students are going to be listening to this podcast. So I think that's what we're really excited about moving forward over the course of the year. And I think has been some changes over the past years where, we were kind of focusing on these platforms that were just getting the most users at a time. But again, they might not be spending as much time as possible and looking through everything on there. They're just scrolling so quickly. So yeah, it should be exciting. And I think the results will be extremely positive.
Wow, Reddit. Didn't think about that. Interesting. Nick, What about you? What do you think are sort of the hot social media platforms to be on right now for student marketers?
I've always got my numbers and the data. No, yeah, I totally agree with Matt. I think there's a difference between what everyone's on and then what everyone actually engages with, and when people actually listen and how they actually read a piece of content rather than just scrolling mindlessly through stuff. But yeah, I mean, last year, everyone was online more, just generally, streaming shows, looking at social media, messaging each other, listening to music, playing games. That's all we could do really, because we were just sat in our houses and our flats. So what we saw was like this increase in mobile use went up 1.8%, internet use went up 7.3%, social media users went up 13.9%. So there was this huge influx of people going, I am bored, I'm going to go and find a social media platform to play with. And we saw the biggest rise from Gen Z and millennials, spending more time on social media. And sort of around the world, it was Latin America, Middle East, Africa and Asia Pacific had some of the higher percentages spend more time on social media than ever before. If you look at the overall stats, Facebook and the Facebook family, so including Instagram, is still king in terms of overall numbers. So in terms of the ability to reach a large audience and target very specifically, it's always going to be, an important part of the strategy, with the right age group. But then you've got YouTube, obviously, the Google products that obviously still huge as well in terms of numbers. But then you've got the rise of, like Matt said, so TikTok. It's definitely been the one that everyone's been looking at really carefully over the past years. Like, where have all these people come from? And there's this big, driven by this younger generation. But I would say, actually, like Murray said in the opening session, I'm on it now and I love it. So some of us older millennials are joining the group as well and being like, okay, we can do a TikTok dance as well. But it becomes a platform, it becomes a place you can potentially engage with the right audience, especially a younger audience. And it's making sure you get the content right, because it's very difficult. It's very easy to come across badly as a university or an education institution on TikTok. Actually, they are going there to dance and chat to their mates. When actually, what if you come across as a stilted college talking about applications, that's very jarring to the experience. So it's about how you use user-generated content and get your students involved, and the students probably know how to use TikTok better than we do. So allow them to sort of fill the advertising channels and the content channels with the stuff that they can put out there. I remember the last webinar we were talking about Clubhouse. And that's a really good example of something that saw a peak of interest and then died to death really quickly, because that was only over the past 6 months. And I was talking about Clubhouse as this potential new channel to look at, but actually now the users have just fallen off. So some have done really well, some haven't done particularly well. And then, thinking globally, they're the sort of the worldwide channels, but then China's got its completely own digital landscape. you've got Russia with VK, you've got the Naver in Korea. I think whenever you look at an international market you're going into, or potentially going into, spec it out and do the research and find out what social media channels are being used by that particular target segment within the country, because they can vary massively depending on where you're going to. And so I was looking forwards a bit and doing a little bit of a prediction. I haven't got many platforms, there's quite a lot of interesting things happening with some of the platforms. So Twitter's releasing things, Instagram's releasing new types of ways of putting content out there. What I would say are that maybe the top 7 things that I'm looking out for. I think live streams are going to remain massively popular. I think we've all got very used to doing it now. We're all very used to streaming everything and talking to everyone all the time. So I think that's going to be a huge part of marketing and content strategy for the years to come. Stories as a content format seems to have taken off across all the social media channels. So how do you engage with that and not just use some of the standard advertising functions? Really interested in how VR and augmented reality are going to be used. That's some really clever wizardry that I just can't get my head around still. But then you've got things like the Oculus, so people using that more as a gaming tool, and then how that then becomes an advertising tool at the same time. But you can do so much more with a VR advert or a piece of VR content. So I'm interested in seeing how the education sector are going to take that and then turn that into content. That's what's one to keep an eye out for. And then, like I said before, it's the type of content that's going out on these platforms. It needs to have a purpose-drivenness to it. So students are idealists and they care about things. And talking about we're a college with this particular course doesn't really fly with them. So if you can get behind ideologies that the college or university that you work for truly believes in and truly has stake in, that can really ring true with audiences. Things like inclusivity and making sure that you're representing prospective students in a way that they can see themselves in your advertising is massively important. And just having a bit of authenticity and transparency, be honest with students these days. There's not gone are the days where it's just all flashy adverts, just talk to them on the right level. I think that's where we're going. Although I could be completely wrong in a year's time. It'll be like, no, all those wrong. But yeah, I think it's where we're going at the moment.
Love your brain, Nick. Callie, how about you guys at VCFA? Are you like handing over your TikTok account to a student, or what's your strategy there?
Well, we don't have a TikTok account. I mean, we have stayed off of this some more trendy ones, I would say, because of that authenticity factor, where it feels like we want to be able to have this feel much more natural and sort of streamlined with who we are and what we can offer. And so we've kind of stayed within sort of the big platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and we have multiple Twitter accounts, and actually writers are a huge block of Twitter users, especially writing for children. They are all over it. And so we've kind of found the places where, for the most part, I think we found the places where we feel as if our audience is, and obviously that'll evolve and change as, other platforms spring up. I also am excited for Reddit in a way that, there is sort of this, you look at Reddit and it's super basic, but it's very authentic. Nobody's there for like the glitz and glamour of Reddit. So, but the other accounts we do sometimes hand off to students or to like grad assistants who help with residencies. And so also as we come back to campus, that will probably return in a way that is going to be really fun. I always like those takeover weeks that we do, and also going back to conferences and things like doing, takeovers for like, here's where VCFA is now, where are we in the world sort of thing. So yeah, we're kind of sticking to what we know, but obviously there's some things that we're open to in terms of, new platforms and what makes sense for us.
Oh gosh, as per usual, I feel like I always leave the social media stuff at the end, but it could be a whole other, I say it every time, it could be a whole other webinar, right? A whole other thing.
True.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys, for this. This has been awesome. It has flown by. There's been so much information and points, really, really good points made. Yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Just thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the conference today, and put your questions in that box. And yeah, and then you'll be able to talk to our speakers later.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
having
you very
us.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.